your speaker tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce her. She's been an Extension Master Gardener since 2019. And I first met her when I was taking a native plants class at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte in Botanical Garden. So she's also a Master Naturalist with the Central Carolina Master Naturalist Program. And she has the native plant certification through UNCC. I don't know when this lady ever sleeps, to be honest. She is also the director of the Marsh, North Carolina Wildlife Federation chapter in the Waxhaw, Mineral Springs area. Is that right?
Waxhaw Marvin area. Yeah.
Marvin area, yeah. And so you can't see in her picture, but she usually has boots on and dirt underneath her fingernails. So tonight she's going to talk to you about, do you have an empty or an unattractive spot in your landscape? Or do you have a particular type of plant you like to grow? Do you have issues like drainage or erosion or poor soil or other problem areas? I was just talking to a guy on the phone this afternoon and he needs help. His soil is soggy. He's got new plants. He paid somebody to plant and then he went back and dug them up and replanted them. So Kristyna's going to offer a lot of answers to questions you might have about your garden. So I will turn it over to her.
That's very helpful. So I'm going to try sharing my screen here and make sure that works. I've done that and pulled up plants that were literally sitting in water. So I feel his pain. It worked though, as long as I didn't plant them right back in. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Good, good. So Debbie is absolutely right. What I want to talk about tonight is basic gardening, and to the point of, well, my title here is to plant or not to plant. And for anybody who knows me and has known me for maybe the last 30 years, the answer is always yes, and it gets a little overwhelming. So that's just life with gardeners, I suppose. So we're going to start with an introduction, which just to get us that we're in it right now. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Master Gardeners, just what we do generally and then what we do locally. And then I'll talk about gardening basics and show you some case studies. And then I always have to put in a little bit in there about native plants because they are my kind of favorite plant, I suppose. And then hopefully we'll have a little time for questions and answers. And I've got my clock going over here, so I'll remember to do that. Debbie did a great introduction, but I always have to show my little Anole friend here, who, by the way, if your house is like mine, these guys are in my house. I think I have I've removed and taken back outside at 8 so far this year. My cat is helping. Anyway, so for some of you guys, maybe the question is why garden? And for most of you, it's probably why wouldn't you? But if you're just starting out, I think sometimes you maybe look at your gardening friends and think, are you crazy? This is I guess technically my front yard. That was in the winter. This is what it looks like in the spring. This is what it looks like in the summer. And it's pretty much the same shot. So I don't really have to do anything to make that look like that. But being able to look at that every day is, in one form or another, sort of really makes me want to go do more. These little guys also came with the property, so I'm really fortunate with that. But all of this, these little guys came with the property too. There's a snake in there. You can see him. That was on my front porch one morning. But all of these are why I garden and why I plant what I plant and do what I do. Because who wouldn't want to see those guys in your backyard when you can, right? So that's sort of what motivates me to do this, and hopefully you too. The Master Gardener program, just to give you a little bit of information about that, has been around for a long time, and it's in pretty much every state in the country. And I guess it's an international program too, so it's in several other countries as well. And depending on what county you're involved in, you'll get an urban mix or rural mix or kind of both. If you talk to people in the Mecklenburg County Master Gardener program, they're going to be more focused on urban landscapes. And with us, we have to mix it up because our county is really big and it has both rural and urban situations there. It does require a lot of classwork. And it does require a lot of volunteer work every year just to maintain your certification. So what I'm doing now is part of that. And we were talking about the farmers market earlier. That's another thing that we do. So Union County locally, we have a grow line that anytime you have a plant question, you can ask either via email, which is the way most people interact with grow line, or you can actually call. It's all on our website. We have this series, the Successful Gardener series, that's monthly, except for December and sometimes July, but this year we added July. We have Ask a Master Gardener events, and we do those all over the place, sometimes at farmers markets, sometimes in our own garden, sometimes in communities that just, are interested in having that kind of service, in their subdivision. We do the Heritage Festival in September, which is a big, big deal. And if you haven't been to that, put it on your calendar for, I think it's September 17th. It is a great time. We have a teaching garden that is open all the time with the Heritage Trail that connects up to the Carolina Thread Trail. And that is an awesome place to go visit. Even this time of year, it's still really nice looking, even in the winter. We have a newsletter and we have plant sales. And I'll have a little bit more information about that toward the end. If you want to be a master gardener, you need to send Debbie, who introduced me, an email. And there's her email address. And the information, there are going to be some information sessions on the 18th and the 19th. And one of those is virtual. So there's, anybody can join that. And then the spring classes start in February and the core training begins in August. And it's a bit intensive, but it's definitely worth it. We're a lot of fun to hang out with. And the work we do is fun too, I think. So I want to start with gardening basics. And this is just kind of the way I view things is that I'm going to start with the things that I can't change and then move towards the things I have more control over. And there's a little bit of debate along the continuum, but you get the idea. So I'm going to talk about where your garden is located or where you're located, what time of year it is, how much sun you have, what soil type you have, how much water you have or have access to, food, not for you, but for the plants, and then how much time you have. And I think that might be the most important consideration. So let's go through these. If you live in Union County, in general, you are in the growing zone 8A. And you can see this is how things looked a few years ago. And this is the projection for where we'll be in a few, well, I don't think I'll be around for that, but some of you might be. So it looks like we'll be in zone 8B by 2070 is what that's showing. And what that means, it's going to be warmer here. And it's certainly warmer than it was because we were in probably 7B even 10, 15 years ago. So what that talks about is how warm it gets during the summer and how many days we have that are less than 40 degrees. And that is important to plants because a lot of plants need to be cooled off, if you will. And they need a certain number of days, not necessarily in a row, below 40 degrees. It's one of the reasons we struggle with tulips around here because we don't often have enough days under 40. But this is, in my mind, this is the thing you can't change. We are in zone 8A or wherever zone you're in. You can look it up online. Just put your zip code in and you can find it. But you can't really do much about this. It is what it is. So you have to be sort of zen about it, I suppose. The next thing is, what time of year is it? And there are certain things that you can plant in the spring and certain things you can plant in the fall. And I used to say, there's really not much you're going to plant in the summer. I mean, in the heat of the summer, until a couple of the ladies last year planted zinnias, I believe in the middle of July, full sun, planted zinnia seeds. They looked fabulous. So if you were at the Heritage Festival, you got to see the zinnias in full bloom. They were gorgeous. Actually, there were some sunflowers over there too. So they must have planted those about the same time. They looked fantastic. I had no idea that would work. I wouldn't have thought so. But you've got to think about what time of year it is and what works, what you can plant at that time of year. So right now, you could plant dormant plants like perennials or trees. It'd be all right. but in the spring, after, and we were talking about this earlier, after April 15th or the last frost date, and you got to really pay attention to that. Last year, a lot of people got caught with some tomato plants outside, and frankly, some blueberry plants outside when it was really cold. But after the last frost, then you can start putting those warm weather type plants out. And then fall is a great time to plant. You replant your lawn. If you have a lawn like mine, you would have to actually find some grass to plant in it. Perennials, cover crops, and fall vegetables are all great things to plant in the fall. But the other thing to consider is, are you going to plant plants? Or are you going to plant seeds? Because the timing is a little different for all of those things. What I'm trying to say here is you have to research all these things and investigate what you're trying to plant and what time of the year it is. Again, can't really change the fact that it is January the 6th right now. So we can't pretend like it's zinnia planting weather, right? Okay, the next thing, and I think that this and the bit about water are, well, no, probably sunlight is the thing that I hear more questions about than anything else. And there, I guess you can change it a little bit. You can cut down a tree, you could add some shade, you could add a tree, whatever. But certain plants require certain amounts of light. This plant up here is a Virginia bluebell. And if you plant that in full sun, it won't make it. It likes to be in the woods. It doesn't like a lot of sun at all. This is a Christmas fern. It'll take a little bit more sun, but not much. It wants to be in the woods. In the wintertime, it doesn't mind getting some sun when the leaves fall off the trees, but in the summer, it would like to be in the shade. But a guy like this, a Rudbeckia, they can take just about anything you can give them sun-wise. They can take tons of sun, as can lantana. Lantana is like kind of your go-to plant when you've got a really, really sunny, hot spot. That's the best thing. So then not only do you need to worry about how much sun you have, but when do you have that sun? Our summers are so warm that if you can have morning sun and not late afternoon sun or late afternoon sun, that's great for your plants. But it seems like that's never really where the garden is. But I mean, that's the perfect place for most plants, but that doesn't usually work out. One thing that someone was talking about, having plants in containers. You put them on some wheels, and I guess you can move them around however you need to get the sun that you need to a point. So that's, one way to be flexible about it. But you do have to consider the amount of sun your area has, or the amount of sun a particular plant needs. You can't really ignore that. The next thing to talk about is soil. And if you hang out with master gardeners much, we will talk about soil and soil testing, and really probably to the point that most people are like, enough already with the soil. But if you have soil that looks like this, and yeah, this is from my front yard. Yeah, it had rained a little bit, but that is just, I'm not even sure you can call that soil. It's gray, and actually the red part's the best part. The gray is really, really bad. But anyway, that's the soil at my front yard. So I'm trying to amend that and make it better. My dad, on the other hand, who lives in Gaston County, where the soil, it's not quite as bad as Union County, but it's not known for being great. He has been putting leaves in this particular area for 10 years and grinds them up a little bit, and he just leaves them there. He left the leaves. And this is actually soil. I dug it up over here and put it in a raised bed I made for him last year. But that is amazing looking. I mean, I was just in awe of this. And it's just composted leaves on top of his soil that we kind of dug around together. So you can improve your soil rather dramatically. It does take some time. I'm not sure that this is, gonna, 10 years may not be nearly enough. That might just get it started. But we have soil testing that is free from April through November. Otherwise, I think it costs about $4 a sample. Either way, it's worth it for the information that you get. There's a lot more information on this website here, and I am going to post this presentation onto our website after this tonight. We'll probably do it tomorrow, so you can get to this link. But it is on Extension's website. The big deal here is to increase the organic matter in your soil. Leaves do that. Compost does that. We're going to have a class on composting in March to talk about that. And actually, our class next month in February is going to be all about improving your soil and understanding soil tests and the things, all the rather complicated things about soil chemistry. He's going to get into some of those things for us. So that one is a really important class to tune into, I believe. You can't know too much about soil. A basic organic gardener's kind of credo is if you feed the soil will feed the plants. Instead of worrying about fertilizing the plants, you're really feeding the soil, and then it in turn feeds the plants. And that's something to think about. And just a note about planting in containers. You can dig up the soil in your backyard and put it in a container. It doesn't do so well. It's one of the few times I actually go and buy particular type of soil. It's a lot looser to put in a container. That seems to do a lot better. Lord knows I've tried the other way where I just dig it up out of the yard and everything kind of dies. So don't do that. So use that container type soil for containers. The little plants do a lot better. The next thing to think about is watering. And I think you do have some control with this if you have, access to water. So if you're relatively close to your house, then you probably have some access to water. But dragging a hose around to water plants is not fun. I've done it for years, but it's not great. The better answer is to try to plant things that want to be in the amount of water that you have in the space. To make that point, these guys down here, they grow wild in what I call the marsh in the front of my house. It's near a creek, and it's wet pretty much all the time. Even when it's really dry, it's still kind of mucky in this area. And this plant is called juncus. Where'd it go? It's called juncus, and it grows in that swampy area beautifully. It seems to love it. It will also grow in really dry areas. So it's one of those few plants that doesn't seem to mind where it grows. This is another, it's a hibiscus coccineus, and it grows, it's a native plant, and it grows in kind of swampier areas. I have it growing underneath the downspout behind the house. And this year, because it didn't rain very much, there were some times in the summer it didn't really rain, so I had to water it some, but most of the time it's pretty happy back there. But things like this guy, again, you'll see this picture pop up a lot because these guys, the Rebecca, are just tough plants, and they work well in many places. They can handle it pretty dry. And this, I'm not sure what type of grass this is, but it's some kind of wild grass that grows around here. It's probably a carex, and it doesn't seem to mind what you do to it either. It may be the same thing down here. I think it's called three-way sedge. That's what I think it's called. Sorry about that. The other thing to think about is, and the reason that I put this picture here is I tried to grow cucumbers in a pot. This was 2 years ago, and they worked fine. They got decent sun there and everything, but you can see these leaves down here toward the bottom, they need some water, right? And so what I found was I had to water these plants every day, which is annoying to me, but they were in a pot. I could roll them around if I needed to, so they got however much sun they needed to. But they did okay. The peppers did better because they don't need nearly as much water as a cucumber plant, but it did work. I just had to water it a lot. It's pretty easy access, so it wasn't a big deal, but it is something to think about with container plants. They do require some more water. I love the idea that you might have some drip irrigation in your garden. It's not cheap, and it has its own sets of issues. There's all different kinds you can do research on. It's probably the best way to water your garden. Overhead's easier, but it's not as good for the plants. Although in my mind, that's how it rains, so it can't be that bad. But having some kind of system in your garden is going to save you a lot of time. I never quite get around to implementing those kind of systems. I seem to be fighting rain more than dryness. So to food, your best place to get food is to, like I said, feed your soil so that you increase the organic matter, and in so doing, add the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that plants need. But they also need calcium and magnesium and a bunch of other minor nutrients. But important to certain plants really need particular minerals to survive. And you can do that by building compost and adding compost to your garden. And again, we're going to talk about that in March if you haven't been to one of our composting classes. The other thing to consider, and our speaker next month will talk about soil pH. As the pH changes in your soil, or whatever it happens to be, different chemicals are available to the plant because of the pH level. And certain plants like your blueberries that we were talking about earlier, they like for the pH to be acidic. Other plants like it to be a little more basic. Most of them like it to be neutral. But a lot of the reasons for that is what is available in the soil at that different pH. And you can affect the pH of your plants if you have any old-fashioned hydrangeas. If you add sulfur compounds to the soil, you'll get bluer hydrangeas. And if you add more like lime to them, you will get pinker hydrangeas. And so that they're almost like the pH test for soil in a way, if you get some of those. You also have plants that are heavy feeders and plants that actually give back to the soil. So heavy feeders might be something like a tomato, or corn is a particular heavy feeder. Roses are pretty heavy feeders. But then things like beans and peas and a lot of cover crops, clover, for example, they actually fix nitrogen, meaning they put nitrogen back in the soil, they pull it from the air and put it back into the soil. So they're really feeding the soil while they're, also adding organic material to the soil. So when you dig them back in, you're adding nitrogen back into the soil. So they're givers instead of takers. All of the pictures of food, of fertilizer here, I've used all of these and lots of other ones, but these all work pretty well. And you can see there's 3 numbers underneath, and each of those corresponds to the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium levels in each of these. So 533 is the availability of those 3 major components for your plants. So depending on what kind of plant you're growing, you would pick a particular type of fertilizer. So then, and I added this one kind of at the last minute because I started thinking about, somebody asked me about roses. A friend of mine who's never gardened, I doubt he's on this call, but if he is, this will be even more fun. But he's never gardened and he wants to grow roses. And I thought, and he lives in Fort Mill, so it's even slightly hotter than it is here. No, TKK. And I thought, of all the things that you want to pick out to grow, that's one of the harder ones to do. And I have to admit, I sort of gave up on roses a few years ago. But doing some research for him, I found out that not only are there all kinds of roses that will grow in this area, we even have a page on our website now for about roses, just to give you some good options. But it's still going to take more time than my woods in the front of the yard that I don't do anything for. It's going to take more time than that, but it's not quite as bad as I thought. But nonetheless, you have to decide, how much time do I want to spend on this? Do you mind if things are a little, messy and haphazard looking, like this is something from my backyard? Or do you want it to be very formal? That's going to take more time just to keep things trimmed up and nice looking. And so you just need to think about that when you're doing your research as to which plant you're going to plant and which type of garden you want to build. And again, this may be the most important thing and you have complete control over it, but you have to decide how much time you want to spend in the garden and on the garden, because in the garden could be you sitting there with your cup of tea, enjoying it. Working on the garden is a whole different thing and maybe not quite as relaxing as that idea. So some basic resources, and I'm going to talk about the plant toolbox a couple more times tonight, but the North Carolina State University has a plant toolbox. It's at this website here. It is fantastic. I think they have close to 5,000 different plants. On the left-hand side of the screen, you will enter what zone you're in, what part of the state you're in, and then what you're looking for. Like, you want something that will grow in the sun, it's a clay soil, you don't want the deer to eat it, on and on it goes. And the more specific you can be, the fewer plants are going to give you, but they'll be more precise to what you're trying to do. It is a fantastic resource. It also has a lot of pictures in it about people's gardens, and some of them even do a before and after. That's kind of a new thing that they've added, and that's just a lot of fun to see what other people have built in their yards and spaces. The extension website has an enormous amount of information. It is fantastically full of information. South Carolina's extension service is really good too. They're through Clemson. And because we're in a similar growing zone to them, I tend to look at their information too. So that's always a good place to go. Both of those are great places. My two kind of Bibles for gardening are my really old copy of Organic Gardening from Rodale Press. It's so old that it only costs $12. And my other go-to, which is a lot newer, I think it was published in 2019, is the Extension Gardener, Master Gardener Handbook. And it is fantastic. And the best part is, yes, you can have a hard copy for $60 or so, but you can also go online to the extension page, and the entire book is online. And it is just a fantastic resource with a lot of links back to other information. So those are two really great places to start if you want a book. So let me show you a few case studies. First of all, let's think about the idea, and Debbie already brought this up. In my mind, if you're going to start something plant related, you either have a place that looks like one of these, this Martian looking landscape over here, an empty spot, to say the least, that's empty, in your landscape, or you have a particular plant that you want to plant. So if you have an empty spot, in my mind, you have to look at how much sun are you going to get. We've already talked about that. Is it shade? Is it sun? Is it somewhere in between? And if it's somewhere in between, is it morning sun or late or whatever? What kind of drainage do you get? We're definitely going to talk about that in just a second. What type of soil? This kind of tells you everything you need to know about the type of soil that was. And then what height or width requirements? Do you have a small space, a big space? You don't mind if the plant kind of spreads out, however you want to, whatever space you have. You really do have to take that into consideration. I think that's probably one of the reasons crepe murder happens, is because people bought a tree they thought was going to be a shrub. And technically it is a shrub, but some of them get 50 feet tall or so. And so they keep trying to cut it back to a 10-foot shrub, and it makes it very sad looking. But, so think about that. The plant, if it survives, will one day get taller, right? And so, like I mentioned before, the plant toolbox is a fantastic resource to figure out what's going to suit the area that you have. And I'm going to talk about both of these areas in just a second. The flip side of that is, if you fall in love with a plant, this rose down here, yeah, one time I did have roses. That is beautiful, but I left it at my last house. But anyway, if you have this rose, somebody gives you a rose and you're like, what am I going to do with this? Then you can also go to the plant toolbox for the same thing. And now you're looking up a plant, and it will tell you about what sun requirements it has, what kind of drainage requirements. Does it like to, there are a few plants that like to sit in water. It doesn't happen a lot, but occasionally. And they need to be wet. But most plants are not like that. Does it have a specific pH requirement, like blueberries? Does it have particular water and food requirements? And, most of us have the deer problem, or raccoons that just like to dig up things. So are there potential predators or some kind of animal, that a cat maybe, that wants to dig up your plants? Something like that you want to consider. The next thing is, how much time or attention are you going to be able to give to this plant? And how much space do you have for this plant? And I've got, so this beautiful rose, if Tina is out there, this is one of her violets that she gave me that I promptly told her I would no doubt kill. That picture was taken 2 days ago, so I haven't killed it yet, and I've had it about a year. I had to do a little bit of research on how to keep that thing alive, but it's gorgeous. Who wouldn't love that? This is a beauty berry that I pretty much think if you'll just leave it alone, it will do this every year. It's really nice plant. And then this is a little false foxglove that just grows at the edge of my woods all by itself. I do nothing for that. I just got lucky. So let's talk about erosion control. This is one of those pictures that I just showed you. So this is water. and it hadn't even rained that hard. So this is my driveway. The house is kind of in front of all this, and this is a little path out to the driveway. Well, in order to get to that driveway, you needed muck boots whenever it rained. I put some paver, what was actually stone right here to help that out. It helped a little bit, but I still had this mess. And so I decided that right here in the place that didn't seem to want to grow grass very well anyway, or anything else, this area right here on a drier day, I'm going to build a rain garden. So I dug it out. You see how beautiful the soil is. This is not native Union County soil because it's way too red. This is called new construction soil. And then I added I made kind of like a bowl in the middle, and there's a drainage pipe that comes through here from our porch. So I knew the rain was going to come in here one way or the other. I also kind of built a lip around it. And then I planted some stuff in there, put some mulch on top of it. And this is still, I mean, there's still, it rains on it. So they're still going to have a little bit of water problem, but not like it was. And this thing has worked great. All this rain we had this last week or so, no problems at all in that area. And most of these plants I found around in that marshy area that I told you about in the front of my house, but there are plenty of plants I found out from the plant toolbox that there were lots and lots of plants that do really well in a rain garden. So far this is doing really well. And it wasn't that hard to build. This, on the other hand, was not quite as easy to build. This was my backyard in 2018. We moved in, this was March of 2018. And we moved in September of 2018. And between then, it got worse. So by July of 2018, and I don't know if you remember that year, but it was very, very muddy. It rained, it seemed constantly. And I figured that most of my backyard was going to be rushed down that stream that was building itself and out into the woods if I didn't do something. So we moved in September, and I spent January through pretty much April terracing this. These are cedar logs that I got from my dad's place. So I terraced it with steps, but I also basically sort of built raised beds using rebar to hold up the cedar. And so the cedar's on the bottom. And then I just used logs and stuff that I found in the woods to kind of build it up. And I added soil that I brought in from a local landscaping company. And then I added plants. Most of the plants that are back here are, if they're not native, then they're pollinators. So my hope was that I wouldn't have to spend an inordinate amount of time managing this. Well, that's what it turns into. The next year, this is what it looked like. Mulch on the stairs makes a huge difference. Anyway, it looks pretty good, and there's some trees coming in, and it looks nice. This was a year later, well, a year and 3 months later. It's nearly overgrown at this point, and so the plants are pretty happy in there. They're maybe a little too happy. They're going to get whacked down a little bit this year, but that area looks a whole lot better than this. It takes care of the erosion. I also built a dry creek bed that runs the length of the house there. So that helped too. And it was quite a lot of work, but it was worth it. So I just followed the space that was already where the water wanted to run. I turned that into the dry creek bed instead of trying to reroute it or make it do something else that it didn't want to. I made it work the way I met it where it was, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that worked out pretty well from an erosion perspective. So the last thing that I want to talk about before we go to questions is I just got to put in a plug for natives versus non-natives. I am not a purist by any stretch of the imagination. If somebody forced me to say what my favorite plant was, it would probably be a zinnia, and that is not a native around here anyway. But they're wonderful, beautiful plants, and I've always loved them. But why not use a native when you can? We are fortunate to live in an area where lots and lots of plants are actually native. And so we have a lot of choice here. They're adapted to the area. They also provide food for the local wildlife. And I will give you some anecdotal evidence anyway. Well, an anecdotal story. I'm not sure it's evidence just yet. This last summer, we had a lot of complaints. I had a lot of complaints around my area. People talking about mosquitoes, and you probably had the same problem. Lots of mosquitoes. It was just that kind of a year. And I try to stay on top of standing water, but it still happens. I did not have any problem with mosquitoes. So I'm beginning to believe that this kind of wildlife habitat that I've built there in the backyard is keeping a lot of amphibians and reptiles and birds and bats, for that matter, that I've given them a home. And guess what they're doing? They're eating a lot of bugs. And a lot of mosquitoes. So I had a pretty good mosquito year, and we'll see if it happens again next year. Just to give you some ideas here, there's some just some native plants. They're not all. This one came with the house. That's a fringe tree. This is actually in the iris family. It's a blue-eye grass that came with the house. This is a scutellaria that came with the house. But some of these I've bought over the years and planted, and they do really well. There's some of them bloom in the summer, some bloom in the spring, a couple not so much winter, but certainly early spring, and they do really well. And relatively speaking, they're easy to manage. So just a little plug for native plants, because they come in all kinds of forms, and they can actually do what you need them to do and look really nice. Oh, there's a nice little butterfly on this guy. Don't forget him. And they do bring in the butterflies and the bees. I believe, oh yeah, I do have some resources for that too. Dr. Mellenchamp, who was a botanist with UNCC and has a lot to do with the native plant certification classes that Debbie was talking about earlier. He's written 2 books. This is one of them, Native Plants of the Southeast. It is a beautiful book. I mean, even for people who don't like plants, I don't know how you couldn't like this book. It's just gorgeous. And he's got his favorites, I suppose, in there. He's got another book that's a little bit more basic, that has fewer plants and all that, but it's a great place to start. And I did not list that one here, but you'll find him online. He's got lots of other books too, but these 2 are really focused on natives. The Native Plant Society, there's one in North Carolina and South Carolina. There's probably one in every state. But both of those have nice plant sales and lots of really good information. Wildflower.org has fantastic information. They're located in Texas, but they have a lot of really good information, and will tell you if a particular plant is native in your area. Again, with the plant toolbox, I can't say enough great things about that. But places to get plants though, where are you going to find this? We have plant sales here. We almost always have some native plants in our plant sales. And so our next sale is going to be in February on the 26th, but we also will have one in April and October. So stay tuned for those. We'll talk about those on Facebook and on our websites and in our newsletters. Carolina Heritage Nursery is a local native plant nursery in Union County, and that you can find them on Facebook. Fantastic plants there. It's fantastic information that Lisa Tompkins has. Ross Perennial Farm over in Ballantyne, of all places. You wouldn't think that in the middle of Ballantyne there would be this really cool plant place, but there it is. You kind of looks like a little house, and then all of a sudden there's all these plants behind it. Plant Delights, I bought some things from them. They're great. They're not local, but it's a good place to buy. UNCC has fantastic plant sales, and so does Winghaven. And I'm sure there's dozens of other ones, but these are ones that I have used in the past and have done really well with their plants. That is all that I have. And so I will open up for questions.
If you want to.
She's having trouble with her sound. So maybe we'll just, let me see if I can, let's see if I can get, I will stop sharing. Maybe that would help. And then we'll be back to just looking at each other. Okay, so Lily says we should definitely all grow roses. And based on what I learned from helping out my friend, that was actually a thing that we can do. So I have to go back and revisit the rose. So do you guys have any questions? Just go ahead and unmute yourself. We'll deal with it. She's struggling there with her sound. Anybody got particular issues in their yards? Susan, can you unmute them? I can't do it. Oh, maybe I can. Hold on. I bet I can. Well, maybe not. We're trying to unmute people. Oh, look at that. Unmute all. Maybe that works. Try now.
Is there a site you would recommend for maybe seeds for native plants?
You know, that is a really good question. I find them all kinds of places. I don't know, you know, like I just got Johnny's catalog. I mean, right now is the time that all of this seed catalogs are coming out. But there's also one, so Johnny's is a good one. They have some native plants in there for seeds. But I know that there are a couple others. I just don't buy a lot of native plant seeds because I've got so many freaking plants.
So True Seed out of Asheville also sells some native seeds, native plants.
What's the name?
So True Seed.
So True. Yes, I've heard of them. And there's another one. I don't know. It's a great question, Georgiana. I will look up some and try to post some on the website, though. That's a good point.
And then Southern Seed Exchange is another great one too.
Yep, that's a good one. Exactly.
Christina, I'm able to see the messages or the things in chat. Mike Edwarden is asking, I can't unmute, but any difference between partial shade and partial sun requirement?
So what's the difference between partial shade and partial sun?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think it depends on who wrote it. So I'm not sure that there's much of a difference. But do think of this, because I've gotten literally burned by this. Well, my plants did. A lot of the plant tags, they may say this plant wants full sun or partial sun or whatever. Those were not done in zone 8A in the Piedmont of North Carolina. They might be from California, and full sun in Northern California is not the same thing as full sun in Union County. So I would suggest, even if you've got your little plant tag and it's got little suns and shades and all that kind of thing on it, I would do a little bit more research on it and make absolutely sure that what the tag says is what you really should do. But partial sun and partial shade, I'm thinking those are really, really similar to each other.
Thanks, Christina. There's another question. I have Brussels sprouts that are growing fine, except the sprouts are opening up rather than being tight. They never were tight. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I haven't, it's been a long time since. Anybody got any ideas on Brussels sprouts?
It could be the cultivar. Some Brussels sprouts will grow in that form. So you'll just need to check to see what variety they are.
So they were supposed to be like that.
So, yeah, some will actually, as they grow and quote unquote ripen, they can, like flower, if you will, or take on sort of a flowery shape.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm the person that asked the
Will grow
question.
and will be really tight.
So I'm the person that asked the question. I figured out how to unmute myself. They're just like leaves. I guess I could just eat them like that. I mean, it's like cabbage. It'd be like loose cabbage leaves. They're just weird. And it's just a basic variety. I've grown them before, so they were tight last time. So it's not the variety, I don't think, because I've grown that variety before and got really nice Brussels sprouts. It's the first time I've ever had this happen, and I thought maybe it had something to do with the soil fertility or something like that.
Absolutely could be as well. Can you drop your email information into the chat and we can research that and get back to you?
Yeah, because you can't be the only person that ever happened to.
Yeah, sure not.
You'd be surprised at how many plants you can actually eat the leaves of, though, and they're
Oh
very
yeah,
good.
they're
Like
probably edible.
broccoli,
It's not a bad thing. It's just that, you know, you like to roast them and you like
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. That's
Broccoli
not what
leaves are
you signed
actually
up
good.
for.
Hmm? Yeah, and I mean the plant's growing the way it's supposed to grow. I've grown it before, and then
Did you grow it in the same spot?
in the same area of the
Okay.
yeah, the same general area, not in the exact same spot per se.
Yeah, but you're keeping the variables pretty low here.
Yeah, it's in the same yard.
Yeah, it's in the same yard. Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, that's the kind of question that we love to get on the grow line so that we can research it and figure it out because
Sweet.
yeah, something's going on. You're not getting what you wanted, so you gotta figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be fertility, but the other issue too is because we've had higher temps and really uneven temperatures as
Mhm.
well. That
That's
could
what
also
my
have
guess
contributed.
was.
Once it gets above like 63 to 65 degrees, Brussels sprouts tend to like do weird things.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought it was, but you know, I just thought I'd ask you guys.
Really good
It's
question.
it's always yeah, that's really interesting.
I'm just gonna let them be and see what they do. They're
Well,
not
maybe
my
it'll
way.
actually turn back into winter again.
Maybe. I don't think they'll tighten up though, but maybe they'll
No,
grow up the
probably not.
stem and be tighter.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay, Brussels sprouts. Experience having grown Brussels sprouts in England and here. If they don't get enough cold weather or it gets too warm too soon, they will open up and flower a little bit like that. You really need super cold weather for Brussels sprouts to stay nice and tight.
There you go. She would know.
Yeah, okay. That's what I kind of thought, but I wasn't sure.
Hoya, do you think they're bolting because of the warmer temps?
No, you'll see, if they bolt, you'll see flowers.
Sure, but
There's
do you
no
think it's the
flowers like
beginning of bolt, or do you think it's just?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you think it's the beginning of bolt, or do you think that it just sounds more like uneven temps?
It's just uneven temperatures.
Hmm. Okay, well there we go.
Which
Thanks.
we are kind of known for, right?
Well, last year they did beautifully.
I think I mean the temperatures that we had around Christmas time were unusual even for
Mhm.
us and extended. It wasn't like one day was 70. It was what, a week and a half? That's unusual.
Christina, I have a question about the work you did in your backyard. When you terraced your yard, did you work from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top?
That is an excellent question. And I don't know if I did it right or not, but I worked from the bottom to the top.
It works. Curious, so thank you.
No, and I thought about that quite a lot while I was watching the mud and the goo happen back in the summer. I'm like, where am I supposed to start this? But it just was easier for me to roll the first log up and then build on top of it, kind of thing, and cut away. So it worked, but I couldn't quite manage how I was going to end up at the right spot if I started at the top.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question about the roses.
Oh, good.
So, I have been noticing a lot of places, like I'm here in the Sun Valley area, and they have some miniature, like knockout roses outside of the Tickle My Ribs, and they are infected with rosette disease. And everywhere I go, the cookout in Monroe has roses infected, and I want to get out and rip these things out of the ground because it's just spreading all over Union County. I lost my Mother's Day rose bush. Or like, is there anything that we can treat to stop the spread? I don't know.
You got the right
Can we
idea with
call
stopping the
somebody?
spread. You destroy the plant. You're right.
Right. So, like, do we need to contact, like, does the extension office have any say-so in contacting places like that, like these businesses that have infected rose bushes?
Ooh, we could be the rose police.
I know.
No. Extension offices, we're educational, we're not regulation. You might
Ah.
talk to somebody at, the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. They do have pesticide inspectors, I think is what they're called, but they do more, if they get a complaint about a misapplication of a pesticide. There's just not the bodies to go make people take out roses that are infected.
Like even I'm off of Rogers, and there's a neighborhood that has knockouts all up and down. And last year I was out walking, and every single one of their knockouts are infected. And then there's a house down the street that's completely infected, and it's a rental. And I'm like, oh my goodness, one of them spread it to the other, and now it's just spreading everywhere else. I just want to start
Yeah.
calling everybody. I actually knocked on the door to that house. They did not answer. Like, I was a crazy person.
We appreciate your diligence.
I just wanted to inform them.
You're not wrong, but
you're
and
not.
let me throw the question out there in case something has come up that I don't know about. Is there any cure for rose rosette?
No, it's a virus.
Yeah.
So there's no chemical control. The recommendation is to pull that plant out and destroy it.
Yeah.
What about pre-prevention? Because it's the little mite that is spreading it. So is there anything that you can spray to deter this mite?
Yeah, you could preemptively spray your rose bushes for the insect, but you don't know when that insect is there.
Right.
You'd have to, I think most of those that control that insect are contact. I don't know if there's a systemic or not.
Okay.
I think this goes under the heading of, for a lot of gardeners, the more you know, then the world looks very different, doesn't it? I mean, you see,
Right.
if you didn't know about rose rosette, you would go, wow, look at that really bushy plant over there. Now you know.
That's why I gave up on roses.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know. Any more questions?
Comment,
Oh, yeah.
that she's not really sure where to begin. She had a bad season last year and she did a soil test, but she's not sure where to start at this point.
Oh, so she did a soil test. This is Gina. Do you
Yes.
Did you get the results back?
Yes, I don't have them in front of me right now, but I did get the results back, and it wasn't this year; it was the year before actually. But
Okay.
growing up, my parents we gardened
Mhm.
extensively and canned and all these things, and I just kind of like let everything go because I think they just burned me out as a child doing it, and now I'm raising my grandchildren, and I know how much easier life would be if we could do some of this ourselves.
Yeah.
Grow our food, put things up, things like that. And like I said, after all that the time and energy I put into it, like the year before last, and everything came up and then died.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
I don't know where to begin. Like, I don't know if I picked the right spot. I mean, I don't know if I should. I don't know where to begin at all. I feel completely useless.
Well, no, you're not that for sure. You did the first thing, which was get a soil test. That was perfect. So my suggestion would be to send those results to the grow line and
Okay.
then start a conversation with one of the people on grow line, and it'll be one of us. And start going through the results that you got, but also look, how much sun do you have in that space? What does the soil look and feel like?
It's really rocky soil.
Oh, yeah.
It's really rocky, and we tried getting as many of the rocks out as we could, but it's probably going to take forever. But my sister also had like 5 years of horse manure that had been composting that we tilled all into that soil, hoping that would help. I just, like I said, I don't know what I did wrong. And
I'm not,
I'd like to try again, but I don't.
The
you're
horse
probably
manure
scared
may be
to,
your
right?
problem.
Yeah.
The horse manure may be your problem.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Really?
Depending on what that horse ate. If it ate something that was treated with weed killer or a pesticide, that actually makes it through the horse's gut. And
Okay.
it actually comes out in the manure, and everywhere you spread the manure can be infected by the horse's manure.
So maybe I should try somewhere else and not a different part of my yard and not even try that area again.
Well, actually, after it's been exposed to sun and temperature for a period of time, the sun is what actually gets rid of that residual. If
Okay.
you're wanting to test that area to see, tomatoes are your best bet.
I put tomato plants in. Tomatoes are the only thing that grew.
Ah, so
But
maybe
they
it's
never,
not too bad.
Yeah.
they never got very big, and the skin was kind of tough.
Usually the plant itself, the tomato plant, is the one that wilts and shows you an pesticidal issue with the manure. So
Okay.
there could be a whole lot of different things. Is that the area that you had tested?
Yes.
But you had it tested before the manure, right?
No, I had it tested after everything died.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Again, because that'll tell you if it's a pH imbalance or what. Because tomatoes are finicky; they are extremely heavy feeders, and would show the the pesticide residue pretty well.
Yeah, now they're the only things that I grew from plants. Everything else was seed, but that's all I had ever done in my life was seed. So I wasn't really sure.
Oh, interesting. And the plot thickens.
I'm guessing this is more of a grow line because it's going to be a lot more questions.
Well, no, one thing's going to lead to the other, but right now is the perfect time to start the questioning, right? But if you'll send your results, and then we can get started on, what happened and when, and what you need to do next. But you don't need to do anything right this second to that soil, right? So now's a good time to start thinking about it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
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 I have one other question. I have no trees. I mean, I have trees along the back of my property, but none in the front. And over the years, I've tried growing trees and I can't get any to grow. So I don't know if I'm planting them at the wrong time of year. Do I need to hire somebody to plant me a tree, or anybody have any suggestions? I'd like something that can give me some shade eventually.
Well, and it does take some time, right? A smaller tree is going to do better than a large tree. You can buy them. They cost a lot of money, but it's just harder to get them to be happy, by being transplanted. But a smaller tree is your better bet. But the time
they come up against my buildings, like they'll come up right up against my house. And I have to yank them out, and they come up against my buildings, and I have to yank them out. That's the only place that they want to grow.
They're probably getting enough water there.
Mhm.
Yeah, you think, right? So
let me just interrupt here and remind you, come October, we'll have our tree and bulb sale, and we'll have some bare root stuff, and we'll have all kinds of printed information on how to plant the trees and where. And one of the big problems with planting trees here is they get planted too deeply.
Yep.
You've got to be able to see that first flare right there right at the edge of the soil. You want the flare to be seen. You don't want it buried deep. But come October, come see us. We'll have loads and loads of trees that you can buy.
So does that mean October-ish is when you want to plant a tree?
Yes, because you want them to winter over and develop roots. Yes.
I remember my dad talking about the sap needing to be down and this and that and the other, and I don't remember. Like I said, I don't remember any of that stuff from childhood, and I feel like I've lost a part of me not having all this to pass down.
Yeah,
The
I understand what you're talking about there,
but the bare root stuff is going to be available for sale in February.
Oh, February.
Yes, that's because they pull it when it's dormant, which means they pull bare root stuff in the winter, and that's when it's available for purchase.
So you can absolutely plant a tree in February, and you'll need to baby it a little bit more. But Moya is absolutely also right that it's about how deep you plant it, and if it's planted too deep, they tend to die. They don't like that much at all. And so when you said you could hire somebody, that kind of makes me laugh, because a lot of people that you hire to plant trees plant them too deep. I would say most plant them too deep.
Well, I'm thinking, I don't know if I could plant one in February. I don't know if I could get anything to dig a hole. I don't know if I could get to the ground where I live in February.
With all your rocks and things, right? Yeah.
I think half of my backyard is actually one solid rock.
I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Well, then this might be the best opportunity to build up.
Yes. Build up soil, build up everything. Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have a structure for a raised bed. There are lots of different methods where you can actually just layer on top of the soil without, but that might necessarily need to be a one-on-one type thing and show you different options rather this format.
Okay. Okay.
And she's absolutely right. You don't have to build a box to make it a raised bed. I did that in my dad's garden just because it made more sense for him. So he knew where to stand and where not to, because he will walk on top of the raised bed if I don't build a box around it. And you don't want to do that. But yeah, you can absolutely build a raised bed that just looks sort of like a graveyard, like a burial mound, right? Kind of thing. And if you're willing to buy a lot of soil, you can start one of those things the minute they deliver the soil, right? But that's,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Well,
expensive.
my family has picked on me because I actually bought a tiller, and it's been sitting there for a year and it still hasn't been used.
Well, there are a lot of people that believe that, or it's not believe, there's data that supports it, that tilling is not really going to help your situation. Building on top is your best bet. And you're building soil. And again, my dad's garden, I mean, I got lucky to get to use it. He had been adding leaves for years there. He wasn't doing much else. I mean, I dug him in a little bit. Sorry, the dog found a ball. But there, he wasn't tilling them in much at all. It was more just layers and layers and layers. But that's 10 years worth. You want to do a little faster than that.
Okay.
But you can haul good soil in. And I'll go ahead and make a comment about that too. There's landscaping companies or places that you buy soil. There's good soil and there's not so good soil. So that's another thing to look at. You want it to, there's a place near me. It's actually in South Carolina. I can't think of their name. Crap. Anyway, they have some soil from Dallas, North Carolina that is all organic components in it, and it's not terribly expensive. It's good soil. It's really good the next year, but it's good the first year.
Okay, thank you. I would like to find out about there because I'm off of 601. I'm not too far from South Carolina.
Yeah, this is on 160 near the Lowe's at 160 and 521, and the name just completely has escaped me.
Well, 521. That's going towards is that going toward Lancaster?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Here's another question about the bare root sale. When is that?
That one's in October, right? No, yeah, no, we had Beer Root in February the 26th.
Okay.
And there will be trees there. It's worth a shot. You can baby it a little.
Are there any other questions?
So I'll just put out there to make sure that you join us next month for to talk about soil in more depth, pun intended. And then the next month we'll talk about composting, and then we'll start talking about plants and fertilizing, and the whole calendar is on our website, mastergardenersunioncountync.org. So you can find everything out there. Is there a list of bare root plants available? I'm not sure, but if there is a list, we'll be posting it on Facebook and on our website. There probably is a list. They usually have one.
They'll have a list in February.
Yeah, I keep forgetting it's not February yet.
And it is a popular sale, so it's first come, first serve. I think the last time we had one, we sold out in a little bit, maybe over an hour.
Wow, that's very
People
popular.
lined up to get into the door.
Yeah. At 10:20, I think there was barely anything left.
Yeah.
It was Black Friday of gardening. I was there.
Our Facebook, somebody asked the Facebook site, it's Union County Master Gardeners, I believe. Gosh, is that right? Somebody that uses it a lot. It's
escaping me as well. Hold on. I'm on Facebook
we're
right now.
on it all the time. I just don't go to it. If you look up Union County, North Carolina Master Gardeners, you'll find it.
Yeah, just Google it and we'll
Oh,
pop
look
right up.
there. Look at that, Georgianne. She's so
Thank
good.
you. You're on it, lady.
Are you gonna be on next year or next month, Georgianne? Because you're helping me. out.
Maybe you can get her to help next time. Okay, well, this was wonderful. Thank you guys. And we'll see
Thank
you
you.
next month talking about soil.
Christina, awesome job. Thank you,
Christina.
Christina.
Really good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And if you could stay on for a minute, Christine, just for
Sure.
housekeeping.
Did you stop recording? Oh, this-
I'm doing that right now.
Yay. I guess the dog can have his ball back. Oh God, he just jumped over the couch.